we're going to bring charges of murder against anyone. I want to know that they really did it, and I want a prosecutor who really knows what happened.
Going to trial, you're telling a story. You really have to pick which witnesses tell your story and take out the fluff.
Just like you, but I also don't believe that crime is always rational.
Alec has lied about a bunch of things, right? We already know he's lying, stealing people's money. But
cross-examination of every one of those witnesses should have been, and do you have any information or evidence on the murder that we're here for today? And the answer would be no, thank you.
Welcome back to the Carolina Justice Report. Today we debut our season 3. We're really excited to get right into it. Today we are talking about the Murdaugh murders. I know you guys have been waiting for this. Stay with us. So I am joined with attorneys Sade Crawford, Amy Lawrence, and Sarah Austin. How we doing, ladies?
Good.
Good?
Yeah.
I know y'all are chomping at the bit to get going with this. So the last time we talked, which felt like forever ago, but it was kind of the trial had not started yet, right?
Yeah,
it was just about to start. So now it has started. We're right in the middle of it.
We're 4 weeks in. We just started week 4.
Right. So there's so much to say. Where should we start? How do you think it's going so far?
Okay, so we're 4 weeks in. The lawyering has been bad, right? The defense and the prosecution has been lackluster. As a matter of fact, when my friends say, is this like that are non-lawyers, they say, is this what like a trial, you said that too.
This is what I said, yeah.
What like a trial is like? And I'm like, no, not normally. We have a story, we have a theme, we know what's happening, we know why we're being told this information. It comes clear. And in this case, we heard opening statements that were rambling, right? That didn't give us normally in an opening statement, we're seeing like a roadmap of what we're gonna see in evidence and testimony we expect to hear, that kind of stuff, evidence that's gonna be presented, and a story and a theme of what happened, right? And we didn't hear any of that stuff. We heard a lot of rambling on both parts, on the defense as well. Matter of fact, we always joke, we're like, if I were defending this case, it would have been a 5-minute opening. And the opening would be you're going to hear a lot of testimony about a lot of things, but you're not going to hear any testimony or evidence about the murder, right? Mm-hmm. And to believe that Alex Murdaugh would blow, because that was his whole thing with Dick Harpootlian, that he would blow his kid's head off is obscene for a continuance, right? For a courthouse continuance. That's crazy. It makes no sense. And then just sit down. That's the way it should have done. But instead we saw, Mr. Harpootlian get up and ramble for 30, 40 minutes, and I was confused by the whole thing.
I'm as you said, I'm one of the ones that I don't know how a trial is supposed to go. This is my first experience.
Do you feel like you know anything more?
I'm so confused, and I feel for the jury.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the jury has got to be lost right now, because watching this, it's like all over the place. I mean, I don't know, but I don't have anything to compare it to, so I'm like, is this normal? Are all these objections normal? Are all these things normal?
And then we're also getting the live stream. We're getting the testimony that's not played before the jury.
Right.
And so there's some testimony that we're hearing that the jury's not hearing. And so I don't know how they're making sense of that, because they're just being kicked out, and then we're getting all this other information, and so they don't even have everything that we have to put it all together.
Yeah.
My mom said, it feels like a lot of smoke and mirrors. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you mean, Mom? Because I think I know exactly what she means, but I want to hear her take on it. And she said, well, I think I know. I think he should absolutely be convicted of stealing people's money.
Right.
But I haven't heard anything that makes me feel like he killed his family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly where I'm at, right? And the thing is when we see a prosecution, it's like smoke and mirrors, the old bait and switch. Because that's what it feels like, because that's what we're seeing. When you take and spend almost 3 weeks of a 4-week trial, convincing everybody, we're hearing testimony from all these civil attorneys like Mark Tinsley. I mean, it was great. It was chef's kiss when it comes to entertainment. But why do we have a civil attorney explaining discovery processes and interrogatories and stuff like that in a criminal trial? it didn't have its place there. And I think they could have absolutely told a full depiction of the story, right? That he was stealing these people's money without putting every witness on, right? We didn't need to hear from Eric Bland. We didn't need to hear from Miss Satterfield's son. We didn't need, Mark Tinsley could have filled that void very quickly and concisely to explain and give a full picture of everything without having to put up every victim and every attorney, no demand.
I almost feel like they were so excited, the prosecution, to get the financial stuff in, that they said, now we have to show them everything. And as far as, I've never been a prosecutor, but you going to trial, you're telling a story, you really have to pick which witnesses tell your story and take out the fluff, right? Because the more stuff you put in there, the more room for reasonable doubt that you give the defense to find. So if they want to put all that stuff up in there, then we could just pick apart all that stuff.
Sure do.
The defense attorney in me, though, is that the prosecution isn't always that wonderful, right? And when we're trying to set up this story, right? We're setting up this story of defense, and we think about, because as a lawyer, you're taught to think both sides of the coin.
Right.
You would say, yes, let me be clear and concise. I don't need 10 witnesses to say the same thing over and over. But the reality of it is if you've tried a case, you know good and well that the prosecution or the other side loads it up.
Oh, no, they're going to do it. I think they got excited.
Is confusing the issue.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're hoping.
Because what we're putting forward is all of this information about financial crimes and character evidence, which you were just so lucky to get in because, if you know anything about trying cases, which, the common man does not, is that stuff we try very hard to keep out that. Why? Because it confuses the jury. And the point is not for the jury to be confused, but that they are given enough information for the prosecution to do what they're required to do, which is meet their burden, right?
Absolutely.
They got to meet their burden. And because of all this extra stuff, what you're seeing is all this character evidence and all this information about financial crimes, you're in here wondering, well, what about DNA? Well, what about the gun?
What about fingerprint?
Yeah, I just think the prosecution, they got so excited to get it in, they put it all in. And then I don't see the defense really just being very succinct about, like you were saying, what does this have to do with the murder?
Yes.
Right.
Because instead of playing into it and asking all those questions about the financial crimes, that's not what you're here to do. And make them look silly
Make
for
them
it.
look stupid for it.
And that's not happening. I feel like everyone is very confused.
Cross-examination of every one of those witnesses should have been, and do you have any information or evidence on the murder that we're here for today? And the answer would be no, thank you.
That should be it.
Thank you. That should be the only
They're not even
question.
asking that question at all.
Right.
Let alone on that night, do you have any personal information about it? Do you have
he ever
any
tell you
knowledge
anything about it?
We concede, okay? We concede he is a lying piece of shit who stole people's money, right? That should be that should have been their opening statement. But he didn't blow his kid's head off. He's a lying piece of shit who stole people's money but didn't blow his kid's head off.
And I can't imagine that this testimony is helping those crimes later, but the trial of those crimes later, because now we have all these under oath statements.
When you have all these witnesses saying he's a lying piece of shit who stole people's money, right? It makes you lose credibility when it goes on for 3 weeks, right? Because this is a very long trial. I think this trial could have been done in 2 weeks, start to finish, if they would have been.
When is it supposed to be done?
With evidence they have, probably 4 days.
Maybe. Right, I know, right?
About the actual murder?
No, absolutely. About murder.
One day opening, 1 day closing.
Right.
2 days of guns that weren't the murder weapon.
Right, and we're seeing this, and the cross-examination is sucky. So with the ballistics expert, essentially what we've learned about ballistics is we can't say that any of these are the same bullets, right, that came from the same bullets. We can only say that this cartridge that was taken from the dog kennels, right, this cartridge was expelled at the dog kennels. We can't say that's what killed Maggie or Paul. We know it didn't kill Paul. We can't say it killed Maggie. And we didn't take it into evidence till 3 months after the murder, right? So we went back and found some casings around the dog kennel that cartridge was expelled from the same gun that this cartridge near the house in a flower bed was expelled from. Okay, well, it's a hunt lodge. There's fucking bullets everywhere. Sorry, I'm getting I shouldn't curse. Getting all all riled up. But beat me out. But that's that. I mean, and this is the deal. It's not that I don't know if Alec Murdaugh. I don't think he did, according to all this evidence that I've seen. But if we're going to bring charges of murder against anyone, I want to know that they really did it, and I want a prosecutor who really knows what happened and has conviction in that, right? That gets up and tells the story. This is what happened, and this is why we think it happened, and this is what the evidence will prove. That's what we should expect on every case that's ever brought, right, by a prosecutor, and we're not seeing that here, and that's the part that makes me upset. Like, it's this rush for judgment because we couldn't find anything else. So we're just going to take all these pieces of things and kind of throw it together, and hopefully something will stick. And I think that everybody, South Carolinians, deserve better, right?
I also think that, they messed up this crime scene from the first day.
Literally,
it was
within the first 20 minutes. Right.
And I know that Alec has lied about a bunch of things, right? We already know he's lying, stealing people's money, but he's also lied about even being there. He just lied about a bunch of different things. So I'm fully convinced that he's a liar.
Okay.
But I don't know that he did these murders.
I don't think like he did it.
I don't think that they can prove that he did these murders. But so I don't know where I fall as far as guilt versus innocence. But the defense lawyer in me is like, well, I don't know he did it, so he must be innocent because they haven't proved any of it.
Right?
And I think that the testimony from the housekeeper. I think the biggest thing for me, of everything she said, was the fact that she was allowed to go in and clean that house like 8 hours or something after 2 people were murdered there. Like crime scenes like that, they aren't left open. They should be secured. No. The whole thing.
The cops were still there when all this was happening.
Even if she was murdered at the kennels, Maggie and Paul were murdered at the kennels, they had dinner. You want to know what they were doing before, what they, all that stuff is in the house. And now the housekeeper is just allowed to go in and clean it up.
Contaminate
people
it,
walking all over the place, the evidence lost. It's almost like it's contrary to everything that you think and see when a wife is murdered or any spouse is murdered. You're automatically like, okay, the other spouse is the suspect.
Always.
Immediately, that person almost has to prove that they're innocent.
Well,
in this case, and maybe it's because of who he was and he had all his lawyers and all the police show up right away.
I think it's very much so about who
That's
he
why they sort of just let it go.
Well, crime scene investigation 101 is you remove everyone from the scene, right?
Yeah.
Everyone. You take them back. You take off his clothes. You take those into evidence. You do fingernails. You ask him for consent to fingernail scrapings and all those things, like we see with the victims.
You don't let all
and then
those
you
people
separate them. And if he wants a lawyer present, that's fine. That's not an issue. But you take them to a totally different area, right? You take them back to the police department. You put them in a room, and you ask them questions there where it's all being recorded and stuff like that. We're not in the back of a patrol car consoling people,
No, and I mean, it's secure and your police officers are collecting all the evidence. They didn't do any of that. And so whether Alec did it or not, there's no amount of investigating now that can undo all of the stuff that they messed up.
We keep saying that it absolutely played a part of Alex, who he is, right? And his prestige, right, in the community and stuff like that. But we had a murder case that we took all the way to trial where SLED was the investigating officers, and I mean they left this woman's throat was slit from ear to ear, and they left box cutters that were found beside of her head and didn't take them into evidence. So I'm not sure. I mean, I think SLED has a problem, right? And we know that they've been doing that. That was 20 years ago, and they're still doing the same thing, and that they need to take a big, hard look at what their policies and procedures are and going forward, because we don't want this to happen again.
Yeah, and I think that at the time, it's easy to play like armchair lawyer and Captain Hindsight about at the time that this was going on, he wasn't really outed for these financial crimes yet, right? Like he just had the meeting with his law firm about money being missing, and maybe Maggie knew, there's some indication that she knew the finances weren't right, but the police officers and the public who responded to these murders didn't know that he was this thief at this time. So those are people that, if you watch the HBO documentary or or listen to anybody, they talk about how he ran that town and the police officers all knew him and he would have them change accident reports. And so those people responding to that scene that night loved him and loved Maggie and loved Paul. And they had no reason to expect that he was this lying person at that time. That's not making an excuse for the way they investigated. They should not have given him any passes because of that. But I think that's where they were when they went to that scene, and that's why it got so messed up.
Okay, but let's put a different spin on it, right? Think about it in a different way. If I loved this member of the community, this person who is considered to be a pillar of the community, who's had family members who have participated in the prosecuting of cases in this area, and you walk into a murder scene where his wife and his son are brutally murdered and executed, would you not have had a heightened awareness? You would have been on point. You would have crossed every T, dotted every I to make sure that this man who you loved gets justice for the murder of his wife and his son.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Right? I wouldn't let you trample through the crime scene.
No, they should have been more secure, but I think that's
right.
the reason
I would have
why
made
they weren't looking at him like they should have been.
And that's
well, they weren't looking at
you didn't
anybody.
have to be looking at him,
but secure it.
Yes,
no, absolutely.
Because you then
because you love him
create
so
the
much
issue,
you want.
right? You then created an issue where how can you get justice,
for
right?
anyone.
How can for anyone,
no
right? For
justice.
him, this man that you loved, how can we get justice if you did not properly investigate or properly maintain the scene or whatever? So like there should have been a heightened awareness.
Yeah. I just don't think we were ever going to get that level of investigation into him that night because of who he was at that time.
Oh, yeah.
But I think now, if he would be, somebody was murdered on his property, it would be like they're taking everything from him.
Yeah.
Because of what he's been accused of so far.
Yeah.
They know that he's bad.
Going into this, and anybody who's watched our Carolina Justice Report would know that I couldn't wrap my mind around somebody killing your kid like that, right?
Yep.
I mean, I can wrap my mind around people killing their kid, but this was the most heinous of crimes, right? Paul was shot, and the kill shot was underneath his throat, and the whole back of his head comes off, and it's the worst of the worst, right? So I went in. I tried to go into this trial with just really looking at the evidence, because so much of the stuff we haven't seen or heard about. And so I've been kind of on the fence, 75% not guilty, right, at this point. But I think the change for me, what changed for me was that made me go more 50-50 back, 50-50 again, was the testimony of Miss Shelly, right? Miss Shelly is an angel of a little human being. She worked for 30 years as at the school, right, at the elementary school or middle school, and she was the home health care nurse for Miss Libby, which is Alex's mom.
Yeah.
And she, I see everybody keeps thinking that she's scared in that moment, but I don't see fear. I see that she's so torn.
Yep.
Her heart is torn because she even says that. She's like, they're such a good family. And she loves Alec, right? And we know through the testimony of the other witnesses that he was the one that always came when his mom and dad were sick or in the middle of the night or whatever they needed. He was the sibling that went running at all times, right? Matter of fact, Maggie said he ran himself ragged taking care of them, and that his siblings needed to step up. We heard that testimony. And so, but for her, I see her little lip quivering, right? And I can see how torn she is because Alec has said something to her that doesn't sit right, that feels wrong. And he has said to her, make sure you tell the police I was here 30 or 40 minutes. And watching her so torn in that moment, she couldn't even, when he mentioned about the wedding, a couple of days later, from what I understand, she testifies that he says, hey, I hear you're getting married. If you need any help with the wedding, I know they're expensive, you just let me know. And even in that moment when they asked her about that, she said, no, but he said that because he's such a good man, right? Because she's so torn.
Yeah.
But we love people who do bad things, right? Mm-hmm. And so that felt like probably the most honest, real testimony that we've seen in this whole trial was Miss Shelly, and that's what made me lean towards more guilty. And then today, it all flipped back to not guilty. Because we heard from the
DNA. It really is different
Yeah.
every day, and I think the physical evidence is just so lacking for me but I do, I know that he's a liar after watching all of this.
Oh, 100%.
He, in my opinion, he knows what happened. He was there.
I think he does too.
I think for them to tie all of this to, because I never took the position with Amy that you just don't kill your kids, because we've seen it happen all the time. But when you think about it, it always comes from a place of rage or very deep fear and rage and anger. It's like a split second thing when husbands kill their wives or their families. There's stories about a woman wants a divorce and she gets killed for that. Mm-hmm. That happens all the time. And And so for me, him getting in trouble for stealing money is not something that would make him so rageful to kill his family. But when I see the stuff about Maggie saying that she was on to his financial troubles, maybe she was gonna bust him for some family things or leave.
But I haven't
or
heard any testimony of that.
Triggered him.
We've heard this.
I thought the housekeeper said that Maggie knew she was on to she was questioning the financials.
Yeah. But I also thought it was interesting, though, hearing from all these people that knew the family so well. I kept waiting for some sort of like flaw in his character of how he's acted.
Like as a bad parent?
As a bad
right?
parent, or gotten mad about something or whatever.
As a defense attorney, that is like,
that's the hard
why is all
part
this
for
character evidence?
It's like he treated his wife so well, his kids so well.
Even to people who hate his guts, right?
Yeah.
Which a great example of that would have been the lady who is the CFO of PMPED, his law firm. You know, she finds out she gets up there, oh, he stole this, and he stole that, and he stole this, and he's a liar, and he's a thief, and he's a liar, and he's a thief. And they're like, oh, did you ever think that he killed? Oh, no, I don't think he killed his kid. No, his wife. He loved them so much. You know what I mean?
I don't see a motive for that.
I think see a motive
people do
either.
it, but I would like to know what
the reason behind it, if he did it.
I don't know.
Chime in, Charday. What you think?
Like of the opposite camp. I believe that there are things that happen in this world that aren't explainable. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes good people do bad things, and that it's not always so. I don't believe that we should give it's rational. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think that crime is not always rational. And if I've learned anything in the defense of people, because I was always the person that's like, but why?
But why?
Yeah.
Right? But why? Like if you're a drug addict, like when did it start? Like why did you want and if something happened, but why?
99% of the time you get to that why. Like they were molested as children and don't want to deal with it. Like there's been this like thing.
I don't know, but there's just some things that are just not rational. And so I don't know. I guess I'm just not seeking this explanation for it. It doesn't make sense to me either. I'm just like you, but I also don't believe that crime is always rational and that I necessarily have to have this answer wrapped up in this pretty box with
I
a bow.
don't think, and I agree with you there, because I don't think I need an answer but for me, it almost, crime like this is irrational.
I know. Yeah.
So the story of my finances were about to blow up, so I killed my family almost feels too rational.
Right.
For a storyline for a crime that
because
is... Because if
they were rational, we would have seen...
Right, so there's
life insurance,
what was happening
right?
that made you do this irrational thing?
Right.
Because when we hear...
That's crazy. I don't think we're going to get to an answer.
No.
I think maybe Buster knows, because
he knows that family dynamic. I think when we see this Snapchat video, right? Mm-hmm. It's like Paul is it's like pure joy in that video, right? Mm-hmm. His dad's trying to get this tree to stand up, and he is gut laughing at his daddy, right? It's cute, it's funny, it's sweet. So we see that was supposed to be 2 hours before the murders, and then we hear in this video that Paul took with them at the kennels, they're laughing and joking around. Yeah. Oh, Bubba's got a chicken head or a guinea, or I don't even know what the heck any of that is. If it's a real chicken or I don't even know what that is. Or maybe a duck or something. That's some hunting stuff. That's over my head. But when it's just we're looking for that rage that would get you to blowing your kid's head off, right? Yeah. Going up and shooting multiple times into your wife.
It's too rational of a story for such a heinous crime. It don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
But they can't.
It don't even not make sense to me. Do you know what I mean? It's there's somewhere in between. I'm in purgatory, and I'm searching for the answer, and I don't think we're ever going to get it. Although I just heard the testimony of the DNA expert that just came through, and it's funny because they're talking about STR mix, star mix technology in DNA testing, and we've seen star mix DNA in all kinds of cases. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people are like, I don't understand any of this. And it's so funny because when it's my cases, they explain it perfectly, right? Mm-hmm. Makes total sense. But the way they were explaining it to the jury today, made no sense. It made me confused. Mm-hmm. And I know exactly what it is and what it matters. And I'm trying to make heads or tails of it. And I think that was intentional. Mm-hmm. Because what I gathered from it is that Alex Murdaugh's DNA is not anywhere it's not supposed to be, right? And what we learned is underneath Maggie's fingernails, there's a probability that there is either two probabilities. It is her DNA and an unknown person, or her DNA, which we expected through her own fingernail, right? And this CB Rowe. And CB Rowe is a man who was a groundskeeper for a couple weeks, right? And on the night of the murder, when they were asking Alec questions like, who do you think would have any issues with Paul or Maggie or you? He immediately went to the Beach family, which I understand. I mean, everybody gets mad that he immediately went there and says,
that makes sense.
You know what I mean? Because Paul has killed their daughter, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. Logically, it just makes sense. And then he says, well, Paul told me this crazy story and about this new groundskeeper that they have, this mowing and doing stuff, and about how he became an FBI informant for like against the Black Panthers, and like it was like some weird story. And when I heard it, I thought, that's the most outlandish thing I've ever heard. Like that don't even make sense. Is he just making this stuff up on the fly? But then we learn that underneath her fingernail, there is a probability that it is her DNA and this CB Rowe guy's. Which is weird.
I never investigated where that guy was or if he was there, I'm sure.
Probably not. Who knows? Hopefully we'll
Another
see that
question
later.
mark.
And if Maggie wasn't living there and he'd only been there a couple weeks, what is his DNA doing underneath her fingernails?
I also don't know that Star Mix is so
Reliable?
reliable.
It's not.
But I mean, well, it's not, you know,
But
it's
I
so
do
funny.
think it's worth-
not reliable in this case, but it's
Right.
real reliable in every other case.
In my,
Right.
in
The-
my brain,
Right,
it's
all our
reliable.
Defense-wise, it's
Yeah.
not reliable.
But
it's
it should be reliable enough for you to go say, "Hey, where was CB Rowe?"
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
maybe
Definitely.
maybe it is a red flag to say, "Let's go get his cell phone from them. Like,
Right.
let's see where his data
Where he
that
was,
night.
yes.
Let's see where his car that night.
Well,
let's
has that
look."
not been done?
I haven't heard about it.
No.
right.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
So it's just like another question mark thrown in, and I don't think STR Mix is like.
It's not the end all be all, but like
It's
but
kind of
we
like when
should be
someone
seeing-
fails a polygraph
but if
test.
Alex Murdaugh killed
It's not
someone.
reliable. They might be lying.
But
so
if-
let's look into everything you're lying about.
But if Alex's DNA was there, or at least part of his DNA was there, because that's the whole point is you don't have a partial DNA profile, then we would know it. Believe me, they'd be waving it all up and down.
Right.
Absolutely.
But they're not doing that.
'Cause they don't
And I
have
think it's by design, they've made it more complicated than it needs to be. Because again, it feels like we're doing smoke and mirrors and bait and switch, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like
It's
that.
like, look at all these guns.
Look at all these guns, and now one of
At
them
a
is the
hunting
murder
lodge.
weapon. At a hunting lodge, yeah.
How do you feel about how the judge has been handling everything?
I mean, we love Judge Newman.
I do.
We love him. He has the best temperament.
He really does.
You know, he's not shaken by anything. There's
No.
a bomb threat to his office.
Cool
He's
and
like,
collected.
we're gonna evacuate and everything's gonna be fine. And then we're right back at 2:30 and everything's good. We're not even gonna mention it again.
I think
Yeah.
he's the perfect judge for this trial.
I think so too.
I think a lot of the evidence that has come in is just there's no way for a judge to know that it's going to confuse the jury so much before it goes in, but there's a lot of stuff that I did not expect to be admissible in this trial. But the defense did
either.
open the door to some stuff too, so Judge Newman has had to make some decisions.
Hard calls.
Yeah.
Well, and
But
that's
he's not afraid to make them.
what I've been curious about as I've watched. You know, as I said, this is kind of like my first exposure to a full trial, and so from my perspective looking in, it's hard to know what like the rules are of a trial. But yeah, he's always so just like chill. And then when they were arguing back, he's like, I'm gonna let y'all argue this. I'm gonna go take a break. I'll be right back.
Put that in writing. Let me know what you think.
Yeah. And then he
Here's
came
something
back
to
and he
go to
was like,
agreement.
all right, this is what it is. So I just, I don't have anything to compare him to, but I think he's great. And then as far as our two sides, our state and our defense, can you explain why there are multiple people doing the question? Is that normal for a trial where like different attorneys handle different aspects of?
Well, normally you have one or two attorneys on each side, right? That's the thing about Amy Zimmercheck that I think is just, it blows my mind.
She does it all by herself.
She, like, normally, like, I mean, when we try a case, you've done them by yourself too. God bless y'all. I couldn't imagine. Like, I'm a paralegal making sure like all my little stuff's gotten into evidence, listening for all the words to make sure we're good. You know, we've got multiple attorneys on each side, but like, or at least two attorneys on each side. And that's normally what you have, like two attorneys on each side, and you kind of split up the work just because it's overwhelming, especially like in a murder case because there's so much evidence and stuff. But I think we've seen, John Meters, which they hired just to help in this case, brought him back to the AG's office. We've got I mean, I haven't seen Alan Wilson do anything, but he's over there. They said that he's the one who's making a lot of the decisions, which we've never seen him do any of that before because he doesn't normally try cases. He's more of a manager of attorneys, but he's running for office, so we're going to see his big old head sitting there. But we're seeing a lot of attorneys on each side,
right?
Because it's just a mass amount of. And we've got some new attorneys, so they're letting them get their feet wet too.
Right. A criminal trial, so to keep, and it's been long, right? And so in civil trials, we get to take depositions first. We kind of know what everybody's going to say. So they've already given a statement under the oath, so you're prepared. When you go into a criminal trial, especially one that's going to be this long,
trial by fire.
With this magnitude, you're going to sort of assign people each witness because it's going to be impossible for one person.
Yeah, to do all
To
that.
be prepared, to be fully prepped for every person is hard.
For everything. Yeah, so it definitely takes a lot of people.
What about all these objections that are back and forth? Is it normal to have that amount of objections?
Yeah.
Yes.
Actually, I think that they've missed a lot of really huge, big opportunities on the defense side to object. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, if I were there, I'd be like kicking everybody under the table, like, objection, no. Like, because there's a lot of stuff that no one objected to that I thought was just crazy.
You know, but one of the hard things, though, when you're in trial, especially when it starts getting long, is you kind of get browbeaten and you get tired. But you can't ever get tired.
Somebody's life's on the line.
Yeah. And so when I've been in trial and you get tired, that's when you have the person that's next to you to say,
kicking you under the table.
Because so the point of objection is, even if you think you know how the judge is going to rule, if he were to be convicted and he wants to appeal this later, if you don't object to what you didn't think should come in or to the error, then you can't bring it up later to get the conviction overturned. So you've got to preserve the record.
You got to preserve it. Yeah.
And so if you get tired, like Sade said, and you just let things go, well then Alec can't bring any of these things up later because you didn't preserve them in the record. And so you really have to be, the defense, at least at a minimum, more so than the prosecution, has to be objecting to everything, even if they think it might be something. And even if they know the Judge Newman's going to say, sit down, no, you still have to do it.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting, off topic, Chris Wilson and the opioid addiction.
This opioid addiction is bullshit.
I know, but it's like they all say they're so shocked. I don't think he has an opioid addiction. I'll say that right
I
now.
don't either.
But I'm excited for the financial crimes trial for real, because where did all that money go? Like, money, unless he's like washing
just disappear.
is traceable.
Yeah.
Right? Unless he's like some Breaking Bad. Even then, you could figure it out.
Ozark shit.
But
the Ozark. That's what Patrick
and all
McGowan
these
calls
people
it.
are so surprised that nobody even knew, because he was being a lawyer still, being a dad.
Trying cases.
I think everyone knows someone who's been addicted to opioids at this point. Like, we're all an arm's length away from that, and it's like it doesn't go unnoticed for 20 years.
No.
And you're not this high functioning person when you're addicted to opiates for
especially
20
not
years.
opioids.
No.
And where he stole so much
Millions.
money. So where did he spend it? That is so traceable. And so I'm just like, I'm ready for this. The murder investigation, in my opinion, botched from the beginning. So I don't feel like I could ever convict him based on this evidence. Do I know if he did it or not? I don't know. But the financial stuff is like, I think the answers to the murder are in that investigation.
Oh, I do too. I've always said I think that there is something way bigger at play here. My mom and I were talking yesterday, and my dad, because now they're all in at this point. And, I've always felt like Alec is tied up in something bigger. I have a feeling it's drugs, right?
Yeah, opiates might be involved.
Right, absolutely. He just wasn't popping them, right? He wasn't shooting them up or popping them in his mouth. But like, when I think about this, what I see, I just think that there's too many things that don't add up, but they add up. And so we see guy gets Moselle, right? And Moselle, and he is tied to the guy who did federal prison for the bullware guy.
Yeah.
He's tied to him and gets part of Moselle, I think, the acreage for like $1 or $5 or something in court of the deeds. And so he's tied to the bullware guy who's done prison time, right? We know that the kennels were once, there is an airplane hangar somewhere on property. I don't know if the kennel used to be one or whatever. They keep calling it the hangar, right? The airplane hangar. They refer to this in the trial. And it had a landing strip at one point, right? But the guy didn't have an airplane, which is weird, right? Isn't that weird? Yeah. He owns these tiny islands. And I don't know if it's him or his family, but they came up, these little islands that he owns. One of them he donated to the sheriff's department. He's a special prosecutor, and in all of his years of being a special prosecutor, that is, just in badge and namesake alone, really, he has gotten himself involved in only 2 cases. And according to the things that I've seen online and the public index and stuff, he inserts himself into 2 cases, and they were drug trafficking cases. And he makes an offer for them not to have to do a mandatory 25 years like everybody else in the state. And when that prosecutor gets upset, like, why is he inserting himself into these cases? He's told to stand down by his boss, Duffy, right? And those 2 defendants were in a known gang called the Cowboys. And we know, according to some documents and Amy Zimmercheck's motions, is that Alec Murdaugh happened to have a group chat, and the name of that group chat is Tombstone, right? And she wants to know who was a part of that Tombstone group chat. And what do we know about Tombstone the movie? Tombstone the movie is a movie about cowboys. I mean, I think this is all just like it's just a little bit too ironic that all these things are tied together.
Yeah, that the financial crimes investigation is more thorough.
Yeah.
Than
No,
the
I don't think it will be. And I think that he
I-
will play guilty, right? I think he'll play guilty to it.
Yeah, I just think that, there's a lot of stuff.
So there won't be an
going on there.
investigation into all that.
You're not addicted to drugs like that for 20 years, and the only you spent millions of dollars on opiates. Then you're dead. You have millions of dollars and you're addicted to those kinds of drugs. You're not living for 20 years.
No.
And so where did it all go?
You die of a fentanyl overdose is what happens
Now,
in these
we
cases.
know, not related to that trial, but as far as the financial stuff, do we know anything about when that trial will start?
I don't think I don't anticipate there being a trial. I think he'll plead guilty to it. And he's looking at like 99 years for that, right? Do I think he would get 99 years for a bunch of white collar stuff? No, I don't. But
He might get off
we
the
shall
murder
see.
and take his chances.
do you blame him? I mean, that's what I would do too. But I mean, I think what we want to hear from Alex, right? And I think
I don't know that I need to hear
if he is really,
Will he be taking the
I think we
stand?
want to hear from him.
I want him
him
to,
to
make the story make sense, but I also, at this point, don't believe anything that he says.
Right.
True.
Well,
That's true.
Everybody keeps talking about how he's this narcissistic, like, charismatic guy who is all in it for himself and wants to snow everybody. Well, bring on the show, right?
I'm curious.
We
I
want to
wanna
see, because if
yeah.
he really is this narcissistic piece of crap that's gonna like give us our jazz hands and all of our stuff, then let's see it. Bring it out, because that's what we expect from a narcissist, right?
Yeah.
He's gonna come in and think that he is bigger and better than all that, and he's gonna tell a story. Well, I want to see it.
Yeah.
I want to see it. I want to hear him say it.
Let me ask you
For
guys
my own
this.
I don't think we will. Oh,
For
entertainment.
my own
yeah.
entertainment, and maybe just to like try to, play detective in my mind and pick and choose what I believe about what he says to like put it all together. I want to see him do it, but I
And do
don't
we-
think it's going to make a difference.
Do we know if he's going to take the stand?
We don't know yet.
We don't know. Okay, that's what I thought.
I would assume probably not.
Blanca was talking about how he was trying to convince her that he was wearing a light blue shirt, right? Did anybody hear that testimony? He was like, yeah, I was wearing the light blue Vinnie Vines shirt. Vinnie Vines is what he meant.
Yeah.
But she's like, no, it was a seafoam
Yeah, I remember
green
that.
Columbia shirt. Well, I went back and watched that video. I don't know a man who can tell the difference between light blue and seafoam green. I asked Justin, I said, hey, babe, what color is this shirt? He goes, I don't know, light blue. I go, okay, I'll lose my mind. Yeah. It's just, I don't know, there's too many weird things.
The Housekeeper was definitely probably my favorite.
Blanca.
Just
Miss
because
Shelly
I was
was
like,
my
the fact
favorite.
that she was there.
The two of them, I
next
got
day.
them. I was most drawn into those out of
Yeah.
everything, you know.
But I
Man,
mean,
she
even
said
Blanca
there was,
talked
like-
about how much they loved each other
There were
and like
pots
were
in the
loving.
fridge, and it was like not normal in there. I'm like, dang, I really wish a police officer would have went in
Well,
there.
she
and took
kept
some
saying,
pictures before she cleaned it up. I wish
well,
she
she
went
kept
outside
saying
and
like,
was
this
guys,
isn't normal.
She
This
said
isn't
normally.
normal.
She said normally when they eat dinner, like as a family, that they just leave all the pots in the
Right.
food. Like normally, I'm putting everything in like in a Tupperware, right?
She
and
said
then
that was not normal.
right.
She said it was not normal that the pots were in the fridge.
Yeah, because
Right.
they're normally on the
Right.
stove.
Yeah.
That's what she said. Normally, she just leaves it all there for her to clean up in the morning, like just still left on the stove.
Yeah, and she said there was clothes in the bathroom with
Well,
the
and
water.
what I thought was weird
And
was
there
the
wasn't
clothes.
blood everywhere, but like maybe
Right. There
wasn't blood
there
anywhere.
were some answers.
Yeah, oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
also the folded clothes in the middle of the room of her nightgown or her night. outfit?
They weren't folded. What she said is that she knew the underwear had not been. I wish somebody would fold. Listen, I'm the one who does laundry at my house, and I'm not folding any underwear at my house. Okay.
I fold underwear.
She said it was just like laying in the middle of the door.
She said it still had the crease in the underwear.
Right.
It was laying in the floor, but it still had the
worn.
crease where
Right.
that it wasn't
That
worn for
whole
very
little
long.
sack was laying there.
And I just wish that she went outside to the police officers who were still there, who should have never let her in.
Hey, asshole!
and said, "Hey,
Can somebody come document this?
this is
doesn't look
unusual."
right. Yeah.
Yeah, I liked her a lot though too. Let me ask y'all this: are the attorneys supposed to be likable or not?
It's usually
Yes.
helpful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want to be likable.
Well, because I feel like
And
the
approachable.
defense is so unlikable. Like the main
we've
guy,
talked about that as
he
well.
just comes off so unlikable.
Because this is their
He's
best
laughing
friend.
at the witnesses. Like
If this was
comments.
Sarah on trial, I would be like sobbing the whole time, and
Yeah.
like loving on her the whole time.
I
Like
said
she didn't kill
to
anybody.
Amy, like this is their friends, right? So this is like their best friend who's on
Yeah.
trial for murder. So if my best friend's on trial for murder, I am bringing like
A game.
everything I've got to
Yeah.
exonerate
Full
my best
arsenal.
friend.
Yeah.
And you're just not seeing that
No.
kind of effort from them. It's almost kind of like,
Just going through the motions.
and I think Mandy Matney said, I think on Twitter one of the other days, one of the only things I've ever agreed with her about was like, this is just every single attorney in here is an old white man. And for me, from the defense side, you're still getting that sort of like,
Well, it's the confidence of a mediocre
the
white man is
confidence
what
of
we're
like,
seeing.
this isn't like laughing it off almost. You know,
Yeah.
like they've always been above this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, they definitely should.
Well, he gives these little like snarky laughs to certain like witness responses and stuff like that.
There's
like
a
the
way
son
to do that and still be
of the
likable,
housekeeper.
but they're not.
No.
You guys need to watch Amy Zimmercheck do a
Yeah,
trial.
I don't know.
This is not what lawyer looks like.
No,
not a
it's
good
not
lawyer
very
anyway.
good. Yeah.
Now, who
'Cause it doesn't
chose
really
the
break it
state's team? Like the prosecutor, those attorneys, how did they get to represent this case?
Tax dollars pay them.
Tax dollars pay.
It just is like a random thing or what?
No, well, Alan Wilson, who is the head attorney general, and I always say he's a great manager of people, right? Because he tries to put the best people for cases. And a lot of them, like Creighton, from what I understand, he normally does like murder, like violent crime kind of stuff, or, high profile stuff. And then they brought in John Meters, who was in he had been an AG before and had went into criminal defense and opened his own practice. I think it was his own practice, and they brought him back because he was a veteran. He tried many cases, murder cases, and he tried some against Dick Harpullian and won.
Gotcha.
And so they brought him back, and then they just put a team of attorneys together in their office that can be good support and help get through the discovery and help.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. And then we've been, broadcasting this. We've been live streaming it on our Facebook and YouTube channels. And some of the questions I might as well ask you ladies right now, they're not showing anybody viewing any of the stuff that, like any evidence or videos or like we're not able to see that through the live streams. Do you know why that is?
So yes, because there's a lot of evidence that has personal, like social security numbers or phone numbers or addresses of witnesses and stuff. And some of the pictures and stuff are very gruesome. And so what they did was every day at the end of trial, the judges in the AG's office and the defense are like releasing things for us to see with those things redacted out of it.
Gotcha.
But like we're never going to see the
jury
crime
gets
scene.
to see the full picture.
Is there anything that you think has gone right with this trial so far? Starting space.
For me, it's less the trial the trial is what it is. The lawyering's not great, but for me, it's like the investigation gives you a good trial or not. Like the evidence gives you a good trial.
Yeah.
For me, the whole thing's been horrible because the evidence is just not there.
Yeah.
You've charged, and for me, even as a defense attorney, and just seeing things happen all the time with prosecutors, they just they get a little bit of evidence and they charge the first person with the highest crime instead of really investigating and figuring out what happened. So I think Alec was there, or Alec knows what happened, and maybe he did wrap the gun up in that raincoat and take it somewhere, and he's accessory after the fact, but like we don't actually know what happened.
Right.
And now you have someone charged with murder, with doing it, and even if he gets convicted now, he's in jail for murder. You don't know any of those other things and who else was involved and how many people were involved, and less about the why and more of getting true justice for Maggie and Paul is figuring out what happened. And you're just not going to get that when you overcharge people based on evidence that you don't have. And that happens all the time, and not just with murder. It's like...
And I think that's what we see. It becomes more about the win and not about the justice of it, right?
Yeah.
We talk about this all the time. It's about the win and not about the justice of it. And everybody deserves better than that. Maggie and Paul deserve better than that. Their families deserve better than that. Alec deserves better than that. And everybody that comes after Alec that's charged. Everybody deserves. And we want to hear a prosecutor get up and tell us what happened with conviction and not leave us with more questions and answers.
Yeah.
Especially at the trial, right? Because this is when you're supposed to have it all together.
Yeah.
You should not be at this point charging someone with killing their family unless you know that they killed their family. But that doesn't happen. That's one thing that doesn't just happen to Alec Murdaugh. That happens to people all the time. All the time. Anytime someone dies, most likely someone's getting charged with murder, even if you can't prove it.
Yeah.
I always like to ask kind of towards the end of the what next, right? So how long is the trial supposed to go on for?
I anticipate another 2.5 weeks.
I think, didn't Creighton say this morning he was ready to wrap up on Wednesday?
Oh, yeah. And
So
also, but let's talk about
then
this
the
real
defense
quick.
gets to go.
Yeah. So then they're going to put on their whole case. But I think this is important. We had 2 witnesses get COVID this morning.
Jurors.
I mean, did I say witnesses? Jurors, you're right. We had 2 jurors get, and they were 2 seated jurors. And they talked about continuing the case. And I love Judge Newman.
They both agreed to delay the trial, and Judge Newman was like,
Nah,
nope.
I'm not staying down here another day that I don't have to. That's,
Exactly.
that's what I heard. Yeah, and I don't blame him one bit.
Do they have
No, me
alternates?
neither. I blame.
And 2 alternates got popped in.
Yeah, you see, it's
Yeah,
alternate.
they have 6
Yeah.
alternates. So now
Yeah.
they're down to, we had 1 alternate leave because they were hospitalized for something, and then and then these 2, then 2 jurors have been replaced, and now we're down to 3 alternates.
And I think that says something about the lawyers both agreeing that they wanted to delay this. Means that neither of them feel very strongly about it. Because if you think you're winning, you're like,
You
no,
go,
no,
no, this
no,
train got to keep going.
mask up. We're back in this.
Yeah.
And so Judge Newman did the right thing to keep it going because
Yeah.
we cannot watch this again. But yeah, I think the fact that neither of them were like, they were all like, yeah, Judge, we're good with delaying it means that you guys both feel like you're losing.
How does it work with the jurors when they decide? Does it have to be unanimous? Like, how it's got to be a unanimous, or they're not guilty, or
All
either
guilty,
way?
all not guilty.
Yeah.
Or
it's-
hung jury.
Or it's hung.
And so that's what they mean by like the jury's in there for hours upon hours because they have to all be
They're
unanimous.
duking it out.
Yes. Agree.
Well, why don't you think it's guilty? Why do you think it's not guilty? You know, whatever that is, and then they're discussing it.
Does the judge have any say in that final, or no?
No.
So when there's a jury, the judge is just like the referee, pretty
He's
much.
like, not it, I'm out. I've done my job. He charges the jury, gives them the law is what that means. And then they have to take
The facts and
and
apply
then-
it to the law.
And I think it's kind of crazy that, so I didn't realize this, but so it's discretionary in South Carolina whether a judge allows you to take notes or not. I called a judge friend of mine because it was like it's been debated back and forth. They've had to, because every jury I've ever had, every case I've ever tried, they had a notepad, right? They weren't allowed to take it home, but they were allowed to have a notepad. That way, when they heard facts or times, they could write it all down.
Right.
But Judge Newman does not allow them to have notepads.
Interesting.
So they can't take any notes. So this is a lot, and we're not seeing any demonstrative.
Yeah, there's a lack of
Like
charts,
no charts.
diagrams.
Yeah. I went back and found the chart that you made for our closing argument.
Yeah.
I was like so proud of that. I was like, yeah, this is what it needs to be like. Serious. Like everybody's like laughing
Like
at me.
the jury's trying to make sense. I'm excited. What comes next is the defense. I don't know what that is. Hopefully Alec testifies.
Just for
If he
entertainment
was my
value.
client, advise him not to, but whatever he's going to do. I'm excited for closing arguments because I've been very confused by the story the prosecution's telling, so I'm excited to hear them sum it all up.
Wrap it up, yeah.
And like, what was I supposed to get from all this?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited for closing arguments.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're going to get what we would like to get.
Oh, I
but
have a feeling. No,
I'm still gonna
nothing's getting tied up with a bow.
I'm still going to be confused, but I want them to say, like, what
What were you trying to do?
going?
Yeah.
You know, where were you going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Give me your roadmap.
Well, what was it? Because, like, so opening arguments, you're allowed to talk about evidence that you think is going to come in. Opening statements, right? Because closing arguments, you're allowed to actually argue all the stuff that's come in. So that's where you get to really hear the lawyers sort of tie it all together for you,
Right.
and what they think all this evidence means. And so I really want to hear what the prosecution thinks this means. As far as the
One thing
murders go.
I learned, I want to say, I don't know if it was at trial college or one of the CLEs, but they teach you when you are trying a case A, B, C, right? Always be closing. That everything that you do is supposed to tie back into your closing argument. And I just haven't seen that.
Yeah, there's so many things that I'm like, how is this relevant to closing?
You know that
Like,
saying.
how is this relevant to your closing, your story, the whole thing?
There's not one. There was never a
I want
story
them
to
to
begin
do it.
with.
I want them to take every fact and I want them to put it.
Tell me what everyone told me that went along with your story.
I want to know.
Normally,
I
you would
want
get
to
up there
know
and
about the
an opening
groundskeeper.
statement. You
I
would
wanna
make it
know.
all about bad police. You know, you're going to put the police department on sleds going on trial here. You know, this is the worst policing I've ever seen. That's what we would
It is.
expect,
It's
right?
pretty bad.
That's what Dick or Bloom should have said. You know what you're going to not hear? You're not going to hear about anybody doing anything right. You know what I mean? And now the real killer is running free or whatever you're going to say. We didn't hear that. Normally you hear, and Alec did this and this and this, and this is why I killed him, and we're going to prove it by showing you this, this, and this. We hadn't seen that either. We didn't hear that in opening, and we hadn't seen it this far.
No.
All we've heard is a bunch of junk.
It just all sorts of things. So I really want them to. I want them to sit down and gather. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in that process where everyone has their notepad and they're all like, all right, what got in and what didn't and how are we going to use it?
They're like, they got this big old, they've got their big Post-it note, right? They got somebody's got a Sharpie, and they're like, okay, let's
Did we get that in
brainstorm.
and how do we use it?
Yeah.
That would be
To tell a cohesive story.
Yeah, that would be it.
Because normally you have a theme,
Entertaining.
right? And you have a story. So we know what happens. So like bad police work would be a theme, right? That you would have as a defense attorney. Or I guess their theme is he's a thief, so he killed somebody. Like, thieves are equivalent to murderers would be their theme, but they just didn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
And normally you hear these like little punches of like, that kind of like bring it back to your closing. Like she was saying, like in our case, we would say, does that make sense? Like they left a box cutter beside this lady's head and didn't take any evidence. Does that make sense? Does it make sense that his DNA was nowhere to be found? These are the things that you constantly kind of like tie back to, but we've not seen any of that anywhere.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that we get something in this
I'm
closing
hoping
argument.
it's going to be good.
It's
all going to make sense.
I mean,
know
we
it.
It's all gonna make sense.
I spent 4 weeks in it and it doesn't make sense right now, but it's all gonna make, don't you
And I
just
just
wait,
think, like,
it's
as
gonna all
us
make
watching
sense.
it, not that we recycle themes or stories or things, but there's some that are just like a thread that you can find a way to weave into every trial. So as you watching it, Rainey, or just like the common person, maybe you don't know in juries, like it's the first time they've ever heard that theme before. But for us, it's like you watch a criminal trial, you can kind of see where people are going. And it's not like people are reinventing the wheel all the time. Like you have to, but you can kind of see. Here, I see nothing familiar to me.
Well, but even if you don't realize that there's supposed to be a theme there, there's not so much like chaotic confusion.
They're just throwing shit against the wall and trying to get something to stick is what it feels like.
Right. It's just so much, nothing makes sense. Nothing makes
gonna be good.
sense.
Closing arguments.
And you kind of like, as I watch it,
I'm getting popcorn. I'm having snacks.
I kind of tune out a little bit at times.
We are shutting down the lovely law firm for closing argument. It's going down.
Well, we have been, like I said, live streaming all of the trial from the beginning, but even before that, even before the trial started, we were doing these chats, Carolina Justice Reports, for over a year now. So we are very invested, right? But we are going to keep live streaming all the trial, and we are going to pop in there a couple times with podcasts kind of along the way, as well as these Carolina Justice Report updates. If you guys have questions, I know so many of you have been watching on the live stream. Love the comments and the questions you guys are posting in there, so we'll be sure to answer those as we kind of do these chats. But of course, let us know. You can always visit us online at justiceislovely.com. We're on YouTube, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, everywhere that you consume your social media, and we would love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching today. We'll see you next time.
When life gets ugly, justice is lovely. The love